within the street TS, started telling them about us, because, you know, we was from the block.
LPD says a 24-year-old Lincoln man died from his injuries. According to a GoFundMe and an adult film production company, the man has been identified as Savion Hopkins.
A whole lot of frustration was on my mind, and I was hungry.
That's why my motherfucking son wasn't fucking with them no more.
Tonight on Dark Hood Tales, we will be taking a trip to the 80s. This episode is about former NYC drug kingpin and street legend Kevin Chiles. This should be a good one. Kick back and fire on up. Kevin Chiles is a former drug kingpin who made millions of dollars in the streets of New York from the mid-80s to the early 90s. He hustled with other street legends such as Alpo Martinez, Nappy Red, and Rich Porter, just to name a few. Chiles' dark life in the streets would eventually destroy his family and friends' lives. You've heard the paid in full story, but you haven't heard the story about the man who was there and even took things a few steps further. The drugs, the money, and the murders. This is the Kevin Chiles story. Kevin Chiles was born on November 7th, 1966 in Asheville, North Carolina. His parents, Barbara and Tony Chiles, moved the family to Harlem, New York City when Kevin was 1. By the time he turned 2, the family was living in the Highbridge neighborhood in the Bronx. Kevin and his younger brother had a rough life growing up. Although their father was around, their mother, Barbara, was still the only provider. Unfortunately, it was hard for their father to maintain a job. In the wintertime, Kevin and his brother had to place pieces of cardboard inside their sneakers to cover the holes at the bottom. To bathe, they had to boil water on the stove because they had no hot water. Not only did the family struggle, every other day Kevin and his brother watched their parents argue and fight. Growing up in the South Bronx in the 70s was a dark time. The borough was filled with burned and abandoned buildings, vacant lots, abandoned vehicles, and many homeless people. The South Bronx had lost 80% of its houses when many landlords began setting fires to collect insurance money, killing hundreds of people, and also leaving over 250,000 people displaced. Just like many of the other kids in the neighborhood, Kevin made the best out of it. A young Kevin was into comic books, baseball cards, and basketball. If he wasn't in Manhattan visiting his grandparents or babysitting his younger brother, Kevin was at the park playing basketball for hours. After working at a nearby market and selling newspapers to help his mother, Kevin and his friends began scalping tickets and even picking people's pockets at Yankee Stadium. Kevin attended Printing High School, located in Hell's Kitchen. Around this time, he began dealing pot and hanging out with his aunt's husband, Kid. Kid was a big-time heroin dealer and was only 13 years older than Kevin. Kid used heroin and would often nod off behind the wheel. Kevin would often have to take over the wheel to make it home safe. Kid would eventually make Kevin his driver. Not only would he give him cash, but he would let him use his cars as well. Kevin seen and learned a lot driving for Kid. He became well known also. It wouldn't be long before he got in the game himself. By the early 80s, Kevin was dealing cocaine being supplied by his uncle Kid. At the time, he wasn't making much money, but was able to purchase new clothes and sneakers. Although he was dealing coke, he still drove Kid around. By this time, Kevin was hanging out with Kid and his friends. Just like Kid, most of his friends used heroin. Kid and his friends would sometimes be so high they couldn't please their women, so the men would ask a young sober Kevin to please their women for them. Kevin was now attending Bronx Community College. He began playing basketball for the junior college team. Playing on the team got him noticed by many scouts, and he would later get transferred to Northeastern University in Boston. Even while living in Boston, Kevin was focused on his small drug operation in New York. At the time, he was only making $1,000 a week. To keep things up and running while he was at college, he left a friend in charge of his operation. After dropping out of college his sophomore year, Kevin heads back to the Bronx. He began living in one of his aunts and uncle's properties. This was in the beginning of the crack epidemic. Kevin quickly learned that crack was taking over the streets. He was one of the first people in his neighborhood to sell crack. According to Kevin, he sold to many popular DJs and rappers in New York City. His mother's younger sister was dating DJ Lovebug Starsky. Lovebug Starsky introduced Kevin to people such as Curtis Blow. Curtis Blow even allegedly wrote Kevin a bad check for some drugs one time. In 1985, a 19-year-old Kevin had his first child. Around this time, he was introduced to a young Harlem hustler who went by the name Nappy Red. Nappy Red was a 19-year-old hustler who stood over 6 feet tall with natural red hair. He ran a block that was making up to $50,000 a day. When Kevin finds out that Nappy Red's working for an older hustler and was making $1,500 a day, Kevin convinces Nappy Red to sneak and sell some of his product on the block and split the money 50-50 with him. Kevin and Nappy Red quickly became partners. The two would eventually run a block of their own and make up to $50,000 a day. Kevin was now making real money. Not only did he have blocks in Harlem, but he had blocks in the Bronx as well. Hanging out with Nappy Red made Kevin popular in Harlem. At the time, Nappy Red had an apartment in the Sugar Hill section. That's where Kevin and Nappy Red spent most of their time. After being forced to shut down their block, Kevin and Nappy Red parted ways. The two remained friends, but didn't hang out as much. Unfortunately, Nappy Red was killed in Virginia the following year. In 1986, Kevin was ready to expand his crack business after finding out that there's an open market in Washington, D.C. Crack had just hit the city, and both users and dealers were paying top dollar to get it.
This is a daily occurrence on the streets of Washington, D.C. Plainclothed and uniformed police swoop down on people suspected of selling drugs.
You just sell syringes and needles? You sell all clean new ones? Yes, sir. You're concerned about...
It's nothing new. Washington police have battled open-air drug markets for the last few years. But now there is a new sense of urgency because people are being killed in record numbers. Officials say drug dealers from New York City and elsewhere have come to Washington to carve out a share of the city's drug trade. Washington's Mayor Marion Barry.
The New York contingency is heavily armed, unlike before where you had local people involved. And according to police, the local drug dealers and drug sellers themselves have to become heavily armed.
New York City hustlers began coming down and setting up shop supplying many of the local dealers. Around this time, Kevin meets a Colombian cocaine supplier by the name of Mario. Mario began giving Kevin kilos on consignment. Kevin's DC operation began growing. Around this time, he was cooking up kilos himself to make sure that his product was top quality. Him and his crew would rent hotel rooms nearby in Maryland and sometimes stay weeks at a time. Kevin meets uptown hustler Rich Porter in 1987. The two had been knowing of each other since the mid-80s. They've ran into each other at places such as the Rooftop. Kevin and Rich both owned a Porsche at the time. Rich, Alpo, and Azzy Faison were known for driving some of the nicest cars in the city. To keep up with them, Kevin purchased a brand new 190 Mercedes Coupe convertible. This turned out to be a bad purchase. He began getting pulled over every other day in the vehicle. He would eventually sell the car to one of his cocaine suppliers. A whole lot of violence came along with the dirty money. It wouldn't be long before Kevin get into shootouts and even harm people. One time, he shot a guy who attempted to rob his little homie. That same year, Kevin purchased a home in New Jersey. The huge house had a swimming pool and full basketball court. Kevin was running a huge crack operation that involved over 100 workers. At the time, most of his money came from DC. In 1988, Kevin opens a clothing store by the name of Boss Sneakers in Harlem. He opened several of other businesses such as laundromats as well. His name was now just as strong as people such as Alpos, Rich Porters, Demencios, Black Justs, and many other New York City hustlers. The name Kevin Chiles began ringing bells in every borough. His lavish lifestyle made him a huge target. He owned several homes, condos, drove the latest cars, went on daily shopping sprees, and even attended Mike Tyson fights. Although Kevin was in a serious relationship, he still dated many females. He would often buy them expensive gifts and take them on unforgettable vacations. No matter what, Kevin always made time for family. He maintained a close relationship with his parents, son, brother, aunts, and uncles. 88 was a good year for the 23-year-old, and the future was looking bright. But in February of 89, something happened that would change Kevin's life forever. On February 24th, 1989, Kevin and a female friend went to see a movie at a theater in New Jersey. At the theater, Kevin runs into Rich Porter in the lobby. The two briefly talked before going inside the theater to watch the movie. While enjoying the movie, Kevin gets a 911 page. He immediately rushed out of the theater to make a call. It wasn't long before he found out that a shooting had taken place at his mother's apartment. Kevin jumps in his car and rushed to the Bronx. When he makes it to his mother's apartment, he finds out that his mother Barbara and two other women were all tied up and shot in their heads. His mother and a female by the name of Rita didn't make it. The other female was rushed to the hospital. A heartbroken and confused Kevin made his way to the hospital to find out what really happened. Kevin finds out that the female who was rushed to the hospital was one of his friend's girlfriend. He would later find out that the female and her friend Rita were robbed earlier that day in the Fordham Road neighborhood of the Bronx. Saray Watson was visiting her friend Rita Falk in a dangerous neighborhood, driving a brand new custom Mercedes-Benz when they both were robbed and kidnapped by three gunmen. The gunmen knew that Saray knew Kevin and demanded her to take them to his house. Saray didn't know where Kevin lived, but had been to his mother's place many times with her boyfriend to meet Kevin. She witnessed her boyfriend drop off money to Kevin there numerous times and assumed it was where Kevin kept money and drugs. Saray then takes the gunman to Kevin's mother's apartment. They waited outside until Barbara came home from work. All three women were handcuffed and shot in the head. 19-year-old Rita Falk and 42-year-old Barbara Chiles were both pronounced dead on the scene. 20-year-old Saray Watson miraculously survived. The robbers ran off with no money or drugs. Kevin didn't keep anything illegal at his mother's place. He blamed himself for his mother's death and was looking to get revenge on her killers. He didn't attend his mother's funeral due to self-guilt. His brother, father, and aunts all took Barbara's death really hard. Days later, Alpo informs Kevin that his friend Randy know the guys who killed his mother and offered to take them out for $10,000. Kevin tells Alpo that he'll take care of it himself. It wouldn't be long before Kevin finds out who the three stick-up kids were. Months later, the hit television show America's Most Wanted aired an episode reenacting the homicides. Thomas Cross and Felipe Concepcion were both later arrested for the murders of Rita Falk and Barbara Chiles. The third robber was allegedly murdered shortly after the incident occurred. After his mother's death, Kevin became colder. Everyone blamed him, including himself. Kevin and Rich Porter were good friends now. Sometimes the two would put their funds together and buy up to 100 kilos from one of Rich's suppliers. Rich complained to Kevin about both Alpo and Black Just. Rich would often give the two 30-40 kilos on consignment, and they'd take a long time paying him back. This slowed Rich down a lot. Rich even called Kevin when his little brother Donnell was kidnapped. Kevin rushed to Harlem to comfort his friend. He was with Rich the first 24 hours of the kidnapping. The day Rich Porter was murdered, he called Kevin and told him that he was about to meet Alpo to pick up the money that Alpo owed him. 1990 was Kevin's last year hustling in DC. He was now supplying Alpo with kilos. At the time, no one knew that Alpo was involved in Rich's murder. That same year, Kevin had his first daughter and bought an 8,000 square feet home in Franklin Lakes. Although Kevin was living the dream life, he still wasn't at peace. He continued cheating on his baby mother and living the fast life. By 1992, Kevin and his crew were being watched by the feds. They no longer talked business over the phone or talked in vehicles. Pagers and payphones became the crew's only source of communication. Around this time, he started a record label by the name of Boss Records and signed a few artists. One of the groups he had signed was the Uptown Kids. Kevin began working with former rapper Bernard Thomas to help build Boss Records. While Kevin was building his record label, the feds continued watching. Kevin would later find out that Bernard Thomas was an FBI informant. In November of '94, Kevin and 22 members of his crew were arrested and charged with operating a narcotics organization that distributed thousands of pounds of cocaine and heroin. For almost 3 years, Kevin sat in Otisville Federal Correctional Institution. After 10 people in his crew took pleas, and after 2 trials, Kevin ended up accepting a 10-year deal. While serving time on a federal camp, Kevin and his female friend Tiffany starts Don Diva magazine in October of '99. Don Diva magazine told street legend stories and featured rare interviews and photos. They called it the original Street Bible. Kevin and Tiffany began dating and later got married. In January of 2004, Kevin was released from prison after serving 8.5 years. When a free Kevin walked out of the prison doors, Tiffany was there, waiting with opened arms. The nightmare was finally over. Well, this was the dark life of Kevin Chiles. Thank you all for watching. Good night. Be sure to like and subscribe to catch more episodes.
Yes, sir. Big Daddy getting laid tonight. Shit, you a fool. Yeah, right. Shit.
No, yo, right around the corner. Open the door.
I am now standing at the crime scene where 3 children were found dead early this morning. The 3 children were reported missing late Monday evening.
So the weekend starts tonight.
Hey!
29 bodies in 3 months.
I don't got no service, y'all.
What you mean you got no service?
I know this is gonna sound like a crazy question, but I gotta ask. You don't think Junior Heist came back, do you?